Okay, boys and girls, welcome to our flipped lesson on histograms. This is Mr. Gasson speaking to you, not Mr. Alver. First video with me in there. Welcome to my flipped video. Basically, today I'm going to go over histograms. We're going to do one example of histograms. There's a lot of information in each slide. So again, remember at any point, if you need to pause, rewind, that you make sure you do that. I'll try to let you know when I'm flipping from one screen to the next so you know when you can pause. Today we're going to work on histograms. We'll work on them in class. So just make sure you know the basic outline of a histogram so we can practice tomorrow in class. All right, let's go on with our first slide. First thing I want to talk about with histograms is a histogram is useful to graph data that is from a frequency table. It is used when you have continuous data. So anytime we have data that continues on and is a timeline, so to speak, that's a great time to use a histogram. As it says in the sentence, when you make a histogram, you first have to create a frequency table. So I've given you a sample frequency table. On the left side, we have our categories, so that's going to be right here. In the middle, we do tallies, like tally marks, okay? And then on our third slot, our third column, we have frequency, and that's how often it occurs, okay? And you can see by my notes I wrote that. Um, so our frequency, how often they occur, tally marks, and then our categories. Here's the thing about categories in a histogram. Typically, they are numbers, and they have to be evenly spaced, no gaps between the numbers. So when I make my intervals, as it says right here, I must make sure they're evenly spaced. They're going to match my horizontal axis when I get to my graphing, and they need to be even and no gaps as we go through them. So example that I could use would be, and I'll write this in here, and you don't need to write my sample, you just need to write down what is already on the screen. Make sure you have an outline of what a frequency table looks like. But to show you evenly spaced for our intervals, I could have like 0 to 3, okay, and then that's going to be 4 to 7, okay, and then I might start at 8 because that's the next number, and I'll do 8 to 11, and then my next number would be 12, and I might do 12 to 15. And you can see they're evenly spaced. What you might think is a spacing of 3 is actually an evenly spacing of 4. 0, 1, 2, 3. That's 4. Okay? When you subtract number 3, but it's an evenly spaced of 4. That would be my categories. And then tally marks would just literally be putting tally marks of when they occur. So if I have a big list of numbers, I might have tally marks that look like this. And then the frequency, I write it as a number, 3, 2, 7, 3. Okay, the tally mark is just helping us create the frequency table. If I were to create or give you a frequency table, I might not put the tally marks in there. That is work. You don't need to see that. The frequency is added up for you. Okay, make sure you've written down what was initially on the screen. You don't have to write down my sampling of numbers, although you can if you want to. And I am going to go on to the next slide, and we're going to go over this a little more. Um, Now let's work on our graph. I know there's a lot of information up there, but fit all this information into your notebook. And this is basically what the graph looks like. So I gave you the frequency table. This is the important parts of the graph. And I'm going to put little marks of where I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to talk about the title, which is right there. The title is very important because that's telling us what the graph is about. Okay, are we finding, something about how many people have, or how many songs you have in your iPod, or how many movies you own at home, or whatever it is? We need to know that title. So that's the first thing you need to make sure you have is a title, so we know what this graph is about. Okay, otherwise we don't know what it's about. The next part that I want to go over is the labels. Okay, I have one label right here, I have another label right there. And the labels are telling us what that category represents. If I start with the label on the bottom here, my horizontal line, that is going to correspond to the categories that I had. So in my last example, I had 0 to 3, I would have those listed down there. And then I would tell you what they are, what do they represent. Number of songs on my iPod, okay? And that's what that would represent. On the vertical label, that is going to represent whatever that category is in the interval for that. So that might be number of songs because I have songs on my iPod, And so that going up there is going to be number of songs. When I have my intervals, I always start at 0. Okay, so my intervals always start at 0, and they must be evenly distributed. Okay, so they start at 0, and then they must be evenly distributed up. Okay, so if I were to make a sample of this one, I might count by fives: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. Okay, you have to make sure that they're even. I can't go by 5 on the first one, then 20 on my next one. It must be consistent. It must be even. I can't skip around. And again, I always must start at 0 as my first one, okay, when I make my histograms. So these are important parts. Don't forget your title, your labels on the side, label on the bottom, okay? You'll end up having some labels here. So I have like my 0 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 11, okay? Let's say I had more bars, okay? And then how high they go. Now, another important part is my bars here. When I look at my bars, and they're kind of hidden behind there, but when I look at my bars, one thing I want you to notice, no gap between bars, okay? No gap between the bars. And when you put your histogram together, you cannot have a gap. They must be touching, okay? The only way you would have a gap is if there was no data in that category. You'd have a category with 0. That would be the only way you have a gap. This is similar to a bar graph, except bar graphs have spacing. This does not have spacing. Those bars will be next to each other. Okay, so again, make sure you've written down everything on this page that was on there originally. You can add any of their stuff that you want. I'm going to switch it now, so if you need to pause it, make sure you pause it before you move on. Okay, let's do an example here. Let's say we survey how many songs are on your iPod. Now, this is all the data I collected. Now, notice I have some numbers that are low, like 8 and 16 and 20. I have some numbers that are very high, like 1,000, 3,003 here, 2,002. Okay, and then a bunch of numbers that fit in between there. I have numbers all over the place. Okay, so that would be a sampling. So each one would be a person I surveyed. So one person had 504, another person had 505, and 8 and 16. So that's how many songs that different people had on their iPods. Okay, what do I do with this data? Well, I'm going to take this data and I'm going to turn it into a frequency table. So I'm going to go to the next slide to show you what I'm going to do there. Now, in my next slide, I made a frequency table. Notice I have a title of my frequency table, number of songs in your iPod. Okay, here's my category, songs. Okay, and then I have my tallies and frequencies, and those words actually never change. Okay, they'll always be tallies and frequencies. The song, my category name, so that changed. And then I have my intervals. And here are my intervals right there. Now my intervals are evenly spaced, okay? They're all going by the numbers there. They're evenly spaced. And we have our data here to look at, okay? And what I'm going to do with this is when I have them here, I'm going to tally all of the other ones from the previous page. Now, you do not need to copy this page down. If you started, it's not a big deal, but I'm going to give you the answer on the next one, so you can just wait till the next screen. But let me just show you real quick what I would do with this frequency table here. If I go back to my number, the first number was 504. So what I would do is I would go on my frequency table, 504. I would look. 504 is more than 500. So I put a tally mark. If I go back, my next number was 505. So when I go to here, more than 500, I put another tally mark. When I go back here, 8. 8 is between 1 and 99, another tally mark. And I would continue that for the whole frequency table, okay? Now let me show you what the finished product's going to look like. And there you go. And this I would like you to write down, okay? And it's the same frequency table just finished. So make sure that you have this frequency table written down. So you may need to pause it because I'll probably move on before you're done. So here what we have is the number of songs. So I did a tally mark just like I was doing. I continued through the whole list, and I found out that I had 21 songs here that was between 1 and 99. I did my tally marks between 100 and 299, and that was 21. Between 300 and 499, I had 13, and 500 and more, I had 33. So those are my tally marks, and those were my frequency. I wrote them down. So that's my frequency table. So make sure you have a complete frequency table when you're done, and make sure that you pause this if you're not done writing it down, as I'm going to go and talk about how to make the graph. Okay, there's the frequency table again, and here's my graph. Now the first thing I have to do is set up my graph. Now when I set up my graph, I have my title at my top, number of songs on your iPod, title, very important. I have my labels, number of people, and total songs. So those are my labels. I have my intervals. Well, I looked at my frequencies and found out that the highest one was 33, so I had to make sure I went to 33. So starting at 0, I went by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. That goes higher than 33. I want to go higher, not too much higher, okay, but I do want to go higher than the numbers that the highest one frequency goes to. Now all I'm going to do is make my bar graphs. Now on the next slide, I'll have the finished bar graph. Okay, so you can wait, and if you're writing it down, great. But if you don't make it, the next slide will also have it on there, and then you can write down your finished bars. But what I would do is between 1 and 99, since I had 21, I'm going to make a bar. I want to make the bars as evenly sized as I can. I don't want to make one 1 inch thick, okay, and then make like this, and then make the next one, super thick like that. That's what I don't want to do. I want to try to make them evenly spaced. Okay, so between 1 and 99, I had 21. So I'm going to make my bar up here. Okay, and that's where my 1 and 99 is. Then between 100 and 299, I also had 21. So that's going to be another bar that's about the same height. Okay, and the best of my ability, I'm making them the same thickness. I'm hand drawing them, and so you got to deal with that. Then for 13, that's going to be between 10 and 15 here. So I'm going to make it up there and there. That one, and then my last one is 33 or more. So I'm going to make my bar for that. I'm just going to continue it off there, come up. That's going to be about in between there. And back down. Now, I always like to kind of shade them in so you can see them. Notice I have no gaps between my bars, okay? And that's what my bars would look like. Now let me go to the next slide to show you what that would look like. And there is my final answer to my histogram. Okay, I have my frequency table right here, all labeled. That's the first thing I have to create. Once I have that done, I now have my graph that I can build from there, from my frequency table. Notice I have no gaps between my bars. Okay, they're there. I can see that most people, according to this data, have 500 or more songs. So that is my overall final answer. So when Mr. Oliver or myself are grading this, we're going to be looking for all of these parts for our frequency table, and we're going to be looking for all of the parts of our histogram. Okay, make sure you have all of this written down in this final slide, plus the 2 earlier blank slides of the general form of what you need and all the notes for that. And we will see you guys tomorrow. We'll go over these and work on these in class. Again, if you have any questions, watch this video again, rewind the video, look at any part again, pause anything you need to pause. When you're done with that, make sure that you guys go and write your summary, which is about a paragraph, and make sure you write a question at the end for your WSQ that is due tomorrow. Have a wonderful night.